It's a Thursday night, no Met game on schedule, so you know what that means. It's time for another edition of Down on the Corner. Tonight, I am more than thrilled to be joined by a legendary figure, standard of excellence on the mound, 300-game winner, Cy Young Award winner recipient, someone who spent some significant years here in New York. He knows what it's like to pitch in the greatest city in the world. Please join me in welcoming Hall of Famer Tom Glavine to the corner. How you doing, Tommy?
I'm good. How you doing?
Anytime we could speak to a Hall of Famer, we're doing great. Absolute honor, like I said, to have you with us. We're eager to hear about your incredible career, especially your time here, obviously, in Queens. So welcome. Before we open the lines to our Zoom room audience, I'll get us started. Just like all the other shows before us, guys, please keep yourself muted until we open it up. We are also joined incredibly by two other former Mets, Eddie Lynch and Steve Trachsel. Guys, between the three, how many games won? Wow. And on top of that, I believe between Trax and Tommy, I think we're looking at number 61 and 60. No, we're looking at, I think, 13 and 14 on the Mets all-time win list. So that's pretty cool.
All right.
Yeah, Tommy, it's well documented that hockey was your first love. You're a standout player in high school, even leading the Eastern Massachusetts team in scoring. You're drafted by the Los Angeles Kings in the NHL. And for people that might not know this, this is what's pretty cool. You're drafted ahead of Hall of Famers like Brett Hull and Luc Robitaille. Looking back, how did your experience in hockey shape your approach to competition and ultimately your baseball career, and what led you to choose baseball over hockey?
Well, I think that as far as the two sports go, I think because of hockey, that's why I loved pitching. In hockey, when you stepped on the ice, you were in the action. So if you didn't like mixing it up or getting in the action, then hockey was not your game. So I loved the fact that the minute you went on the ice, you were in it. And I think that's what gravitated me towards pitching. I just loved being kind of in every play, right? As a lefty, I can't catch. So the next best thing is a pitcher. You're in every play. You kind of control the flow of the game, the pace of the game, all those things. So I think that's what really attracted me to it. And I think that, truth be told, I was coming out of high school, I was a more polished hockey player than I was a pitcher. I think as a pitcher, like so many high school kids, I was very raw. I had a good arm, didn't necessarily know what I was doing. You look at my career in the big leagues, I was a guy who threw a lot of strikes. I didn't walk a lot of guys. That was not me in high school. I struck out 12 and I might walk 12. That's what it was. So, I was just on the mound. I threw the ball hard. And my changeup was to try to throw the next pitch harder than I threw the last one. I didn't know how to change speeds, but obviously I think the Braves saw me as somebody that was an athlete, a competitive kid, somebody they felt like they could work with, and it worked out. And I think at the end of the day, I really was more committed to go to college to play hockey than I was baseball. I was trying to find somewhere where I could play both. And looking back at it, it's probably naive to think that I could have done that, but I wanted to. But I think the unique thing more so than in today's world, because I played through my senior year in high school, college hockey teams were able to scout me through my senior year. Whereas the baseball teams only saw me as a junior. And back then, guys weren't committing as freshmen and sophomores. They were committing as seniors. So I had one less year as a baseball player. So I don't know if that scared some people off, so to speak. But at the end of the day, when I got drafted by both sports, I sat down with my parents, kind of went through a pros and cons of both sports. And the one thing that really stood out to me was that I was a left-handed pitcher. And I possessed an advantage in baseball that I did not have in hockey. So I thought, you know what, you better try and make use of this, and thank God it worked out.
Also interesting that you mentioned that in your high school days you were a hard thrower, and in your early minor league career you also were a hard thrower, and it kind of led early on to some arm fatigue a little bit, and you ran across the Braves roving pitching instructor who's Johnny Sain, And if I'm not mistaken, he basically told you, we're going to throw every day to get your arm strong. And obviously that sounds, you know, sound. It sounds like great advice. Today, I don't know if they would have given you the same advice. So, what was that early mentorship with Johnny Sain? How did that shape your approach to pitching and contribute to the longevity that you achieved in your career?
Well, it's funny because that advice came back to me twice. When I first hurt myself in rookie ball, I remember going through everything in my mind. It's like, well, it's my first year of rookie ball. If I blew out my arm, I can still go to college and play hockey and do. So I was going through all that in my mind. As I was thinking, okay, how am I going to deal with this? So I ultimately went to our coach in rookie ball, Pedro Gonzalez, and I went to Pedro and I said, hey, I think I need to see a doctor. Something's not right. My arm doesn't feel good. And I remember him just saying, hold tight. Let me call the organization and let's see what they want to do. So I remember talking to Pedro the next day, and he said, "Hey, Johnny Sain's going to come down. He's going to work with you, and we're going to go from there." I said, "Okay." I didn't really know who Johnny was, but I said, "Okay, fine." And I remember when Johnny came down, I was talking with him, and he's like, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to throw every day." And I remember thinking, "Dude, my arm hurts, and our solution is we're going to throw every day." So, I thought it was a little bit wacky, but I did also realize that, in high school, coming out of high school, I was not conditioned to go play professional baseball and be a starting pitcher looking back and knowing that, okay, here's your routine. You're going to pitch every fifth day. You're going to throw in between starts. I didn't do any of that in high school. I pitched in high school like most guys, and I played another position. I never threw bullpens. I never conditioned on my arm. I just didn't have time. That wasn't the way it was. So, when I started to think about it, it made a little bit of sense. And I remember him saying, okay, we're going to play catch every day for a week. And at the end of 7 days, we're going to see how you feel. And then we're going to go from there. And I'll be damned, at the 7 days, I started feeling pretty good. And then I think 3 days later, I got on the mound and threw a bullpen and I felt pretty good. And then, from there, it just kind of continued on. And thank God I was fine and healthy and able to get through the minor leagues and ultimately get to the big leagues. And it was funny because I went through a similar thing my first 2 years in the big leagues, to where I kind of did what everybody did, which is you pitch, you throw a marathon bullpen in between starts, and then you pitch again. And my arm just never felt like it recovered from my start, never felt good. And when Bobby took over as manager in 1990, and then Leo came in as the pitching coach, I remember the first thing he said to me was, "Hey, we're going to throw every day." And I said the same thing. I'm like, my arm hurts. Like, we're going to throw every day. And it kind of harkened me back to that same thing I went through with Johnny. And I started doing it with Leo, and, kind of the same thing happened. I started to feel better. And I think it had everything to do with the conditioning factor of it. But I think that playing catch every day and throwing twice in between starts and learning how to regulate my effort really helped me to stay healthy, because like I said, I was on that same cycle as so many guys, where you pitch, you throw that 20 or 30-minute bullpen in between starts, and there was never a recovery phase, it didn't feel like. And I feel like once I started doing more throwing with much more regulated effort physically, I started to feel way better. And then the side effect was I learned how to pitch. I learned how to repeat my mechanics and to do all those things. And that was obviously the big byproduct of it.
So interesting. And Sain, obviously one of those old school guys, and all those old school guys never had, never heard of Tommy John, let alone, being on a DL or whatever. So it's interesting. You wonder if there'll ever be that shift back to those days. You also mentioned one of the choices, the reason why you went into baseball, because you were a lefty. And the old adage that we've heard for years, that lefties tend to figure it out a little later in their careers. You take a look at the early arc of your career between 87 through 90, you had that period of adjustment, including leading or actually tied in the major leagues in losses with another Hall of Famer, though, Burt Blyleven at that point. However, you then become one of the most consistent and dominant pitchers in baseball history. With your own experience as a reference, do you think there's any validity to that says lefties take longer? And what would be some of those factors that led to those early struggles in your career?
I think there's something to it, because there's there's some track record or some history there to kind of suggest that that argument is legitimate. The reason for it, I don't know. I mean, I think looking at it just on the surface, most lefties are not hard throwers or not considered to be hard throwers. So you don't have velocity to fall back on. Now, there's always the exception to the rule. But I think that by and large, particularly in today's games, most right-handed pitchers are in the big leagues because they throw hard and they can get away with mistakes because of velocity. Now, I don't know if that bodes well for them in terms of their long-term success, because I don't know how many of them learn how to pitch. But I know for me, look, when I got to the big leagues, I could throw 90 to 92. I couldn't pitch there. I didn't know where the ball was going. And to me, obviously, after losing 17 games my first year in the big leagues, it didn't take another coach or a pitching coach or a rocket scientist to think, dude, you need to learn how to throw more strikes. Because in a 7-17 year, obviously the 7 games I won, I threw a lot of strikes and I was in the strike zone. The games that I didn't win. So, okay, well, how do you get to the point where you throw more strikes and become more consistent with that? And truthfully, that's all I did that winter when I went home. When I would throw a bullpen, I would 15 fastballs on the outside corner, 15 fastballs in the inside corner. How many times can I hit the spot? And then the next time, do better. And that's really all I worked on. But I also worked on eliminating some movement from my delivery to try and make my delivery a little bit smarter and a little bit easier to repeat. But I knew I had to throw more strikes. And part of that process was knowing that, hey, at max effort for me at 90 or 91 or 92, I don't really know where it's going. If I dial it down a notch and go to 95% effort level and maybe pitch at 88 to 90, can I throw the ball where I want to more? And I did. And that's what I learned how to do over time was, pitch at that 95% effort level, throw the ball where I wanted to, know that, okay, every once in a while I can dial it up to max effort. And I would do that maybe 5 or 6 times a game, always a fastball into a righty, because I knew, okay, if I let it go, if I miss, I'm going to miss in. So I didn't care. So that was all part of my process. And then, a year or so later, I found my changeup and things really took off. But, I think that to me, that's one of the things I struggle with watching guys pitch today is, look, velocity's great, right? And I get it. I understand it. But I always hear people talk about, like, it seems like virtually every team has 10 right-handed cookie cutter guys that throw 95 to 100 with a slider and a mediocre changeup. And when they all talk about trying to separate themselves from everybody else in the organization that's just like them, they always talk about adding a secondary pitch. They never talk about fastball command. And it just blows my mind when I hear people talk about that. And I don't care who you are. You watch guys in today's game that have good velocity. When they pitch well, they're locating that good velocity. When they're throwing that good velocity down the middle, they're not. Guys in today's game are not intimidated. Hitters aren't intimidated by velocity. They've seen it their whole lives. So if you're going to utilize your velocity, well, how can you best utilize it? Well, stay out of the middle of the plate. I don't think that part of baseball has changed very much. I just think that now it's become more acceptable for guys to be in the middle of the plate because everybody thinks the stuff is good enough to get away with it.
Yeah, you talk about the way you pitched and just the way you would set up hitters too, and working both sides of the plate and able to paint the black at any given moment was just it was a pleasure to watch. You were kind enough to be on my radio show numerous times and be part of You Never Forget Your First, a collection of New York Mets first. And one of the questions, I think you had probably the greatest answer to it, and it was, I hope you'll remember this. It was, do you remember the first time you saw yourself on a baseball card and the circumstances around it and what you felt?
I think, yeah, the first time I saw it was I was at my parents' house, sitting, and I don't know, I was just sitting at the kitchen table. It was the winter time, off season, and somebody knocked on my parents' front door. And the way that my parents' house was set up, we never used the front door. We always had a side door where the porch was, and that's where everybody came in and out of the house. So if somebody came to the front door, it was clearly somebody we didn't know. So my mom went and answered the door, and sure enough, there was this little kid out there with my baseball card, and he wanted it signed. So of course, my mom ushered him in, and he showed me the card. And I remember thinking two things: that A, wow, this is really cool. I have a baseball card, and then B, looking at the picture, saying, "Oh my God, this picture's terrible. I looked awful." I look because I think it was they have when they do these baseball cards. They have a tendency to get you at 7:30 in the morning in spring training and make you look directly into the sun. So your retinas are burning. You can't hardly keep your eyes open. And that was the essence of the picture. I was like, golly, I just, my eyes were barely open. I looked terrible, but I was like, all right, well, it's your first baseball card. So that's pretty cool. Hopefully they'll get better.
You're also obviously the cornerstone of that Atlanta Braves dominant run in the 90s, winning World Series, multiple Cy Young awards. When Max Scherzer was here, I got to see whenever he was in the dugout and whatever pitchers weren't on the mound that day, it was a collaborative effort, and they were always talking pitching. Max was showing different grips. Taijuan Walker would absorb all that. Max would tell them to trust other pitches and to expand on their repertoire. Being part of that staff with Maddux and Smoltz, how much being part of that staff shaped your understanding of pitching at that level?
Look, pitching with those guys made me better, no question about it. Now, I don't know if every one of our conversations in the dugout was about baseball. With Maddux, it was probably something disgusting that he was talking about. With Smoltzy, we were probably talking about a tea time the next day. So, I mean, there were probably some things other than baseball. But honestly, I've always said that being in a rotation with those guys made me better, and it made me better for a number of reasons. Number one, look, when you're around guys like that, we came into spring training every year and obviously knew what the expectations were, not only of our team, but of the three of us. And essentially, we wanted to come into spring training every year and be able to have Bobby Cox pencil in 700 plus innings for those three guys. I mean, that was our goal. And, none of us wanted to be the weak link in the chain. Like if we didn't accomplish what we wanted to do as a team, none of us wanted it to be because we didn't live up to our expectations. So that was big. Those guys, I think we all drove each other. If I don't think it was ever a case where, I wanted to be the number one, or Greg wanted to be the number one, or John wanted to be the number one. I think we all knew that at different times during the season, somebody was going to have the hot hand, and that was just the deal. But I think that what we all did was if Greg went out before me and pitched a 2-hit shutout, you can bet I wanted to go out the next night and pitch a 1-hit shutout. I mean, that I think was what really drove us. If one of us went out and set the tone, then the next night, the next guy wanted to go out and at least live up to that tone, or maybe do a little bit better. But I think the two other big things that really helped me, number one was, you always try to have a certain level of trust in your pitching coach. And I was able to have that over the years. And obviously in Atlanta with Leo, I had a ton of trust with him and what he saw with me. But listen, there are always times during the course of a season where you just get out of whack. And it's, hopefully it's a 2 or a 3 start thing, but sometimes it's a 4 or a 5 start thing. And you're trying to find something. And I think we were all pretty good at making adjustments and making corrections pretty quickly. But again, every once in a while, you just get in that rut where you're like, man, I think I feel what I'm doing, but I just can't fix it, or I can't whatever. And to be able to go to those guys during a game and say, hey, I feel like I'm doing this. Watch this next inning and see if I'm doing that. And then if you come in and it's like, well, Glav, I didn't see that. So I don't see you doing that. Okay, that's one thing I check off my list. Now I move on to the next thing. Or you come in and they're like, yeah, man, you're doing that. You need to fix that. Okay, I got it. Now I can start working on it. So it was invaluable having those guys know me as well as they did. And I think we all knew each other as well as we did to be able to watch that. But I think lastly, the relaxation factor being around those guys was tremendous. I've been around so many guys who wanted to be number one starting pitchers because they wanted to be paid like a number one. And I would always have the conversation. That's great. I understand that. But do you understand the responsibility that comes along with that? Do you understand what it's like to be a number one? Because you're the guy. When you go out there, you better win, or you better give your team a really good chance to win every single time you go out there. And there's a lot of pressure that goes with that. And if you're ready to handle that and you're understanding all that, that's great. Being around those guys, I never felt that way. I never felt like I had to take the mound and win, because if I didn't, I knew one of those guys was coming behind me the next night and would be able to pick things up and turn things around. Right. So I think that relaxation factor of knowing that, well, if I have a bad game tonight, one of these guys is going to pick me up. And that's how we stayed out of any prolonged losing streaks for so many years, was because of that. And I think that allowed me anyway. And I think those guys would probably tell you something similar, but it allowed you the freedom of not feeling like, oh my God, I'm pitching, I have to win, because God knows when we're going to win again if I don't. It eliminated a lot of that, and it just made it. I think it made it so much easier to just relax and go out and pitch.
Absolutely. You mentioned Leo Mazzoni, and instinctively, I think I started like just moving back and forth.
Yeah, it's easy to do.
But talking about Leo Mazzoni, and you take a look, and I've gotten a really good, up close and personal look at the job that Jeremy Hefner does, and the way technology has grown since the days of when you guys were pitching, whether it be the Dare system or whether it be to physically to put on the different technology to find out that Drew Smith is leaning like 2 inches more forward than he used to, and just the technology now, pitch shapes and rotation. Do you ever wonder what you would be like as a pitcher today with all that technology available to you?
There's a part of me that wonders, and there's a part of me that's glad I don't have it. Because look, I don't know if all the stories I hear are true. But like I think for me personally, it would have driven me crazy if every time I threw a bullpen, I had to have TrackMan set up and Rapsodo set up and all these things to tell me what my spin was and this, and like to me, it's like I can throw a pitch and I can tell by how it finishes or where it is whether or not it was a good pitch in terms of how I'm trying to throw it. Right? I don't need like it. I don't know that it would have helped me to have TrackMan say, "Hey, your spin rate on that changeup was great." Because to me, I'd be like, "Well, yeah, probably because I threw it where I wanted to, and it had all the characteristics of what I was trying to do." So, I think some of it can be a little bit overkill. I do think that there is some value in it, especially maybe for some guys who are not quite sure what they're doing at a certain point in their career in terms of breaking balls and which ones are good and why and things like that. But listen, I think in every era, new technology comes along, and technology is a good thing. But I think where it becomes a problem is when guys get enamored with it and it becomes overkill, right? At the end of the day, you can have all the information you want, but if you don't know what pitch you want to throw and how you want to throw it and what you have to do in order to make that a good pitch, I don't know how much technology tells you or helps you, right? I see some benefits in it because yeah, I mean if you're able to look at a guy and like for me, for instance, let's say I'm going through a struggle at a point in time and I feel like, okay, well, maybe my tempo's a little bit off and I'm not quite turning the way I want and I'm leaning a little bit too soon or whatever. And you had technology that could tell you that and you could pinpoint that. Yeah, maybe that helps you to turn something around a little bit quicker. But again, I think at the end of the day, there has to be some level of understanding for the individual pitchers to know who they are, know what they do well, know what they don't do well, but ultimately be able to know what their mechanics are and what they need to do in order to throw particular pitches the way they want. And when they don't, then they need to know how to fix it or know how to get back there. And I don't know how much technology can allow. It might tell you the problem, but you still have to fix it. You still have to be able to rectify it. And I think to me, that was always the bigger issue for me. I mean, there were times where, yeah, I can feel what I'm doing, but I still have to fix it. And until I feel that fix, it's hard for me to trust what I'm doing. I don't know how many guys in today's game rely on feel as much as they rely on maybe some of this technology. I don't know.
So as we are on Met site, and it's funny because, as much as we hated those Brave teams, we respected the hell out of those teams. You 16 years in Atlanta Brave, and during those 16 years, part of that was right in the midst of that hated rivalry. You come to the Mets, What was that like? What was the decision, making process? And what was your initial impression of, being in New York that first season?
Um, I think for me it was I never when I went into it. Look, I mean, listen, if I sat here and told you that I didn't think I was going to sign with the Braves, I'd be lying. I thought I was going to sign back in Atlanta, and it for whatever reason, it didn't work out. And once it became apparent that it wasn't going to work out, and I kind of started shopping myself a little bit. There's a lot of factors, right? I mean, I didn't want to go to the American League. I was comfortable in the National League. I didn't necessarily want to go out west. So it kind of diminishes where you're going to go a little bit, and inevitably it came down to the Phillies and the Mets. And listen, both organizations put on a great pitch, and there was lots to like about both organizations. At the end of the day, what it boiled down to me going to New York was I was 3.5 hours from my parents, and I knew that they would come down all the time. My dad and my mom, but my dad especially, huge baseball fans. They came to as many games as they could come to. So that 3.5 hour drive down I-95 to New York was not a bad drive. So I knew that they were going to be there all the time, and they were. Now, as far as going there is concerned, listen, I probably way underestimated the adjustment that first year, no question about it. And it was tough. It was tough dealing with not being in Atlanta and being away from my wife and my kids. That was the hardest part. Getting to know New York and the culture of New York and the inner workings of New York. I mean, like, listen, you go to Atlanta and you got two beat writers. You go to New York and there's 30 guys in the clubhouse, right? I mean, it's different. And I considered myself pretty media savvy at that point in time. I was. I mean, I dealt with the media fine, but that was a lot. I mean, and I think for anybody that's never experienced that, that's a big adjustment. And to me, I say it all the time now, and I do. I believe it. I think everybody should play a year in New York. I do, because it's a different animal, it's a different situation, and I think you walk away with it with a different appreciation. And after that first year, yeah, that first year was a tough year, no question about it. And there was a lot of adjustments for me, but I settled in, and I honestly I really enjoyed being in New York. I did. It was because people ask me all the time, what was it like to play in New York? And my standard answer is there's no place better when it's going good, and there's no place worse than when it's not. So you better stay on the good side as much as you can. And, again, as a visiting player, you come in and you see the crazy headlines in the newspaper and you see all that stuff, and you always think it's a Yankee town. But I'll tell you what, I had a lot of guys tell me it's really not. When the Mets are good, you'd be surprised what this town does. And we had an opportunity there in the playoffs, and I saw what that city was like in terms of rallying around the Mets, and it was pretty really fun and pretty impressive to be a part of.
Yeah, 2006 team, obviously a special group, 97 wins, win the NL East. Can you give me some insights into that team chemistry, that pitching staff, which included the guy that's in the Zoom room tonight, Steve Trachsel. You had Pedro, El Duque, John Main, and Billy Wagner in the bullpen. What made that staff so special and pretty much kind of thrown together? Where with the Braves, you had that long-standing, understanding of each day. Now all of a sudden, it's this kind of like an all-star group put together really quickly.
I mean, it was an interesting dynamic, or an interesting group. I think not only across the pitching staff, but the everyday guys too. I mean, I don't know that we had a lineup that people would look at and go, "Oh my God, look at this lineup." But I think we had a lineup that was a lot of grinders. You had a lot of guys that were professional at bats. Paul LaDuca and Cliff Floyd and Mike Cameron and guys like that just put together professional bats and grinded night in and night out. And I think we were by and large a really gritty team. The rotation you had, I guess me and Trax, kind of the veteran kind of steady guys. You had Pedro, who was obviously electric, battled some injuries from time to time. So That was a little bit of an issue. El Duque, same thing. When he was on, weren't many guys better. So I mean, we had a bunch of different dynamics. And John Main, being a young kid, he was really fun to watch because for a young kid, he was very polished, handled himself very well, didn't get rattled by a lot. So I mean, there was a lot of different personalities, guys at different stages of their careers, but I think a lot of times you look back at teams that are like that, and those are the teams that seem to find success because of that grittiness and that appreciation of just every day going out there and trying to win a game. You're not necessarily a team full of superstars, but you got a lot of guys going out there every day doing what they need to do to win. And listen, I think I've been obviously a part of some teams that had some superstars, and we were successful. But I would tell you, there's a different kind of fun when you're on that team that's not necessarily full of superstars, but guys that just kind of, pull up their boots every day and go out there and grind it out. And I think that was pretty much the team that we had.
We even mentioned Ali Perez. And speaking of Ali Perez, when Andy Chavez makes that catch, game 7, thoughts in your head? Did you think there was any way you were losing that game after that catch?
Absolutely not. When he made that catch, I said, all right, it's our year. We're going to do this. Unfortunately, it wasn't in the cards, but no, there was so much in that series that was fun and nip and tuck. And listen, again, like so many playoff series, you look back at it and there's a pitch or an at bat or a play somewhere that could potentially swing the series in a different direction. And you get in those series like that with two teams that are pretty evenly matched in a short series. And look, a 7-game series is a short series. Anything can go any way. And more times than not, when you look back on it, when you were on the short end of it, it's like, man, if we'd have just made that pitch or got that hit or made that play, this thing would have turned out differently. And I think that series was very much the same way.
I've got 2 more before I turn it over to the Zoom room because the guys each week get really mad at me because I take up all their questions. So the second to last question. We mentioned before, you're number 4 on the Braves all-time list, number 12 on the Mets all-time list. You achieved the gold standard milestone of 300 wins as a Met, August 5th, 2007, against the Cubs at Wrigley. 6 in the third innings, 2 earned runs, and an 8-3 victory. What did
and I had an RBI, by the way.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
What did game 300 mean to you?
It's I guess it's similar to it's similar in some ways to my first career start, right? My first career start, I don't know that I ever really focused on what the hell I was doing. I was in the big leagues and I was trying to come to grips with, oh my God, I'm in the big leagues. Like, this is a dream come true, and I've got family here and everybody's here and this is unbelievable. And the last thing on my mind almost was going out there and making pitches because I was just so caught up in the moment. Winning 300 games, I think, was similar because obviously it's not something I set out to do, but as you get there and you get closer and now you have that opportunity, it's, you think about all those things. It's obviously it's history. It's something I never thought about doing. When you start looking at the history of the game and the guys on that 300 list, and it's really hard for me at that time to put myself on that list because so many of those guys are Hall of Famers and guys that I grew up watching, and I can't possibly put myself in their shoes. It's all those things. So, it's just it's the culmination of so much hard work, so many ups and downs, so many things that you battle through, good times, adversity, all of it. And it's just kind of that culmination of all of those things becoming worthwhile. Here you are, and now you have this opportunity. And I think for me I had a chance to do it in Milwaukee, and I wasn't able to do it. And I, honest to God, I just wanted to get that over with. I did, not only for me, but for my teammates, because it's a lot. Those guys are having to answer questions about it, the whole week leading up to it. And then when I pitch and I don't get it, now we have to do it for another week. And I just wanted to be done with it for the guys. And certainly for me too, because the longer it goes on, the more you're putting pressure on yourself to do it. But, I just remember going out there that night. And truth be told, it was weird. It was funny because it was so hot that night in Chicago. I mean, it was smoking hot and muggy. And my family was in town, and my oldest boy at the time was up all night with the flu. So I didn't get to get a great night's sleep. I go out there, pitch a little bit. We get an early lead, and I start feeling like, oh my God, I feel like I'm getting sick. And and I'm like, here I am with the lead, and I'm not going to be able to go out there and pitch enough innings to try and win, And so I was doing everything I could to just try and stay cool and stay in the moment and stay hydrated and all those things. And inevitably everything kind of settled down. But it was, it was a surreal night. I mean, it's one of those things. Again, you look back at how things work out and God's plan and all those things. And I was so disappointed that I didn't win the first try in Milwaukee. And then subsequently to go into Wrigley Field, win my 300th game in such an iconic ballpark, to do it in a ballpark that, my dad being a huge baseball fan, being in Boston, been to Yankee Stadium, been to Fenway Park, had never been to Wrigley, loved Wrigley Field. It was his first time there. For me to win my game, all those things, for me to win it there was like, okay, this made sense and this was the place to do it. And it just, it ended up being just a great night, obviously.
Last question. Guy that you owned and you loved to face, and the guy who owned you that you hated to face.
Um, well, I'll jokingly say, every once in a while it'll pop up Tony Gwynn's numbers against me, Greg, and John. And compared to Greg and John, I owned him. I think he hit 320 off of me. And I think between the three of us, we had like punched him out like 4 times, and I did it twice. So I clearly owned Tony. Um, but no, I think that when I look back at it, the guy who owned me, Mike Redmond, catcher for the Marlins, he was that guy that, we all would joke about. If I was pitching in Miami against him, he would send a limo to the hotel to make sure I got to the ballpark because he was going to go 3 for 4. Conversely, and again, I don't know why, and I started to feel bad for him towards the end, was Brad Ausmus. Could not get a hit off of me. I don't know why. I don't know what the deal was, but when he came up to the plate, it was like all I had to do was stand on the mound, and he was going to make an out. So it's weird how it works that way, and how guys own you and why they own you. But I did feel a little bit better about Redmond because I found out later on that he owned Randy and Mike Hampton too. So I wasn't the only lefty.
All right, we're gonna turn it over to wow. Steve Lon popped his hand up super quick. All right, so Stevie, unmute and go ahead.
Yeah, Sal really wanted to be first tonight, but considering you already took all the questions, Mark. But anyway, Tom, how are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So Mark touched on it, and you talked about sort of if you're pitching really well, it's the best place to play. If you're pitching really bad, it's not such a great place to play. What was your initial, especially after that rivalry in the 90s? And Mets fans definitely we were pretty butthurt about the Braves. So what was it like for you and your relationship with the fans when you came?
I think it was pretty good initially. I mean, listen, I didn't get off to a good start. My first start in New York was awful. I'll blame it a little bit on the weather. I mean, I think it was 28 degrees with a wind chill in the teens, and it was snowing. So I didn't, needless to say, I didn't have a whole lot of feel on my changeup that day. But so it got off to a rocky start, and I think I won my next start, and it was better. But I did not have a great year that first year, and we did not have a great year as a team. So there was, a lot of that dealing with that. Hey, we signed this guy to a big deal, and he's not having a good year. And listen, I don't care who you are. If you sign a big contract and you don't feel some nerves from that, because you're trying to live up to it, then there's something wrong with you, or you really honestly just don't care. Because it's a big deal. I think any player who signs a big contract can't help but have that feeling of, okay, well, this team signed me for a reason, and I've got expectations, and I want to live up to those expectations. I want to show these people why they brought me here. And my first year didn't go that way. The years after that were pretty good. I mean, I think I made 2 or 3 All-Star game teams while I was in New York. So there was a lot of good there, but it was tough, and it was tough initially coming in there for me personally, facing the Braves the first couple times I faced them, because that's really the only time I'd gone through that, and kind of stood on the mound and thought, oh my God, these guys know everything I'm trying to do, And I think I learned not to worry about that so much after that, and just do my thing, and I pitched better against them after that first year. But like I said, there were a lot of adjustments that first year that I think, quite frankly, I don't want to say I was not prepared for, but I probably underestimated. It was a much bigger animal, I think, than I anticipated going in.
Great,
All
thanks
right,
for that.
so Sal's wearing his Atlanta Braves hat, which is like, wow, Sal. All right, so go ahead, Sal.
All right, before we do, I get a hat from every ballpark I go to. Only problem is I've never been to Atlanta. I have this hat because I lost a bet. Okay, yeah. I am so glad that I did not pull out a Tom Glavine rookie card because you hated it. So
I appreciate it.
my memorabilia, because this is what I usually have, is your first game. I was there.
Okay.
The worst experience I ever had. You're right. It was 28 degrees. It's the last opening day I ever went to, because it's like, I don't need to see that ever again. It was a brutal day. And the one question I have is, I was at the second game after 9/11. What was it when you guys were there for the first game after 9/11? What's the emotion, the feeling? I mean, you guys all lined up. Everybody was hugging and shaking hands. Tell me about your experience of that game.
There was so much of it that was way beyond baseball. Listen, I think all of us were home. You guys are in New York, so you probably have a different perspective. All of us were at home, and we watched everything that went on TV. We saw all of the images. When baseball decided we were going to go back and play, and we happened to be the first team going to New York, there was some trepidation. I'm not going to lie. There was still a little bit of fear. But I think the thing that blew my mind more than anything was when we went down to ground zero and talked to firefighters and policemen and first responders, the whole 9 yards. But to stand there in the middle of it and look around and see all of the destruction, it was unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable. Obviously you see the images of the 2 towers on TV, but when you stand there and you kind of do a 360 and see the damage on all the surrounding buildings and everything that went on, it was just like, oh my God. And even walking down there, I forget the name of the church, which I should know being a good Catholic. But even walking down there, as you got to the church, the first thing you start to see is all the soot and the dust. And then it's just like, oh my God, and it just, what you saw on TV didn't do it justice. And not to mention still the smell of the jet fuel and all that stuff. So it was just really, really unbelievable. And to go down there and again, talk to the first responders, ultimately go to the ballpark and stand there and see Shea Stadium full that night. It was just a feeling of being proud that for a minute you're part of something that all of these people are at the ballpark to be a part of, to get away from what they've been dealing with, even if it's for an inning in that game or the whole game, whatever everybody's snapshot was, so to speak, in terms of how much they were able to erase what the city was dealing with. And to be a part of that was just unbelievable. And listen, Braves and the Mets at that time, we hated each other. We did not like each other. So for us to come together and have that hug, and I think Bobby Cox and Bobby Valentine might have had a hug. I mean, that was unheard of. Like that's never going to happen. So, I think everybody understood the magnitude of what it meant. It was kind of like the first really big moment where as a country, it was like, okay, let's get back to doing what we do. Let's get back to living our lives. And I'm not saying it was easy, but I think everybody was on board with like, okay, yeah, we need to do this. Let's do this. And when the game ended up going the way that it did, and the Mets came back and won it late, it was one of the few games ever that I was a part of where I didn't care that we lost. I really didn't. I knew what it meant for the Mets. I knew what it meant for the city and for the people that were there. And it was kind of like, okay, we'll let you have that one. That's okay. You guys needed it way more than we do. The city needs it way more. But I'll tell you what really brought that all home too for me was that was one of the big things when I came to New York and played. It really blew my mind and struck me. Virtually every security guy at Shea Stadium is a cop and a fireman and all these things. And to talk to those guys day in and day out when you're coming into the ballpark as a player and know how many of them lost a friend or a family member or somebody that day. I mean, that really, if it didn't come home for me that night in New York, it really brought it home for me when I went there and played. It was just unbelievable how many people had a personal tragedy from that day. And it was just something that, I think I guess I grew to respect more and more what everybody in that city, particularly the first responders, went through that day.
For me, I'm glad it was against the Braves because it almost had to be that way.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was weird because the crowd was the trepidation the whole night. And then Piazza hit the home run. It was like, oh, it's okay to cheer.
Yeah.
It's okay to go back and live life. And what a pleasure. Like I said, I'll never go to another opening game, but
I don't blame you up there for sure.
3 innings to get a hot chocolate. I was just, I did it. I'm good. But Tom, thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sal. All right. Anyone else have questions for Tommy? Damon, you're in the dark there, but go ahead, unmute.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it. Hey, Tom. How you doing, pal?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm totally going to change my question to you right now because when I found out that you were going to be on, I'm at a police charity function right now. I'm a retired police officer. And when I found out you were going to be on, I took my tie off and I got my Met shirt on. That's why I'm in the dark. I'm sitting in my pickup truck. You were talking about 911, and I was a cop in Jersey. And just what you said, when you went over there, I was over there for about 6 or 7 days. Just that first time walking in there, man, it was like, wow, this is a third world country we're living in. That's what it looked like at the time,
No, I did. And like I said, I was so struck by just what I saw on TV was not at all what it looked like once you get down there. I mean, the scope of what had happened was just so far beyond what I saw on TV. And it just, brought it to another level. And like I said, you appreciate the stories you hear watching it from afar of the first responders and people running down there into trouble and trying to help people and all of that. And then you get down there and you see it and I think inevitably, I think you're faced with the question yourself of like looking around and going, oh my God, could I have done that? Could I have, and I don't know if I could have or not. I guess if I was a first responder, I would like to think that I could have done that. But like I say, as just a normal citizen going down there and seeing it, it's like, my goodness, holy cow.
Shocked me. It shocked me as a cop. I was a cop in Jersey for 25 years. And when I went there, it was like, wow, it was shocking.
Yep.
Can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
I'd like to thank you. I play for the Sea Caucus Expos, and for the past 2 years, you've been one of our biggest supporters, Tommy. And I can't tell you how much it means to the boys on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, when you come on and you mention their names, it's a big thrill. So thank you for that, pal. Appreciate
No,
it.
I enjoy it. I look forward to the updates every year to see how you guys are doing, and it's fun to follow. So good luck.
Awesome. All right, a few more because I promised Tommy we wouldn't keep him that long, and we're all so. You know what? I got to. Steve Trachsel doesn't want to go on camera because he's got his kids running around in the background. He says hi. Eddie Lynch is here. Eddie,
Hi, Trax.
I'm going to ask you to unmute. And just you got to ask a question. Ed
Well,
Lynch, former
absolutely.
Met. Go ahead, Eddie.
Talk about a bad baseball card. I think you got me at seven. I think you got me at 7:30 in the morning with the
Yeah,
sun
right?
in my
Yeah.
eyes. Hey, Tom, I saw you pitch many times, obviously. My last year in the big leagues was 87, and your first was 88. So we kind of liked it. We didn't overlap at all. But I was a general manager of the Cubs in the 90s during the steroid era, which was a very difficult time to pitch. But you've done some things that I don't know going forward from today that any pitcher is going to do ever again. Now, Verlander's one thing, but I'm talking about guys that are just breaking in the big leagues now. I mean, winning 300 games, average, 15 wins for 20 years, pitching 200 innings 14 times and 192 more. So you had 16 years where you're 190, and most of those were 200 innings a year. I think 4 guys threw 200 innings last year. There were no 20-game winners. The game is in trouble. I hate to be Mr. Bring everybody down, but, the game is in trouble. I think, Tom, you realize that, too, from a pitching perspective. When I first broke into the big leagues, it was work fast, pitch to contact. Work fast, pitch to contact. Now it's you have to work fast because of the clock, but at all costs, pitch away from contact. And for me, that means more breaking balls, less pitches in the strike zone, higher pitch counts. You're throwing 100. They're throwing 100 pitches in 5 innings now. And I can't say that I blame them because, for me, the problem in baseball, the 3 Bs: the balls, the bats, and the ballparks. The ballparks are smaller than they've ever been. And I just did a podcast with David Chandler about these torpedo bats, and he said that he's looking to get exit velocity up into the 120s. So, I mean, someone's going to get killed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the balls. So I think, and I'll ask you this question if you were commissioner and you could do something, but really the only flexibility we have in this game is the ball. The ball, I've got several major league balls here, and boy, they are small. They're like cue balls. There's no seams. They're hard as a rock. I don't know what we can do about the bats. You're going to litigate that forever. I don't know what you can do with the ballparks. People aren't going to change their ballpark, but something's got to change. I mean, the number of injuries, spin rate, which is, maximizing the torque on your elbow, maximizing on the fastball, which is more of the shoulder issue. But, I mean, what can we do we might have a situation where each team has 15 pitchers and each go 3 innings. I want to be that guy in the middle, by the way.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Got to put about 30 games, but what can we do? I mean, we're on a terrible path right now.
I mean, I think honestly, I agree with you. You can't do anything about the ballparks. I don't know what you can do about the bats. I mean, I guess you could maybe theoretically do something theoretically do something about the baseball. I think in my time, I think we had the 1 year around 2000 that was the juice ball era. And there's always that, we're not doing it. But, to your point, as a pitcher, what a baseball feels like. And when you're getting some of those baseballs back that feel like you're holding a snowball in your hand because there's nothing to grip. And when you go to rub up a baseball and put some dirt on it and whatever, and maybe stick your thumbnail in it to see if you can put an indentation into the leather and you can't do anything to the leather. It's like, come on, there's something going on with this baseball. So, so you can't tell me you can't do anything with the baseball. I think to me, and maybe I say this selfishly, but I think the bigger thing is I think we need to reevaluate how we're teaching kids how to pitch. And, again, I'm with you. I say it all the time. I don't necessarily fault these guys in today's game for pitching the way they pitch because that's what they're getting drafted on. That's what they're going to college on. They're going to college and they're getting drafted on velocity. And if you're a guy that can stand on the mound and you can throw it and you can strike people out in high school or college, you're going to get drafted. And, like I used to have days where, and I don't know that I could say it to kids anymore, but when I would talk to a high school kid that was a good pitcher or what have you, and I'd be like, part of it would be like, listen, I'm just going to tell you right now, you're going out there right now and you're getting guys out because you're just physically better than them. You're better than them. There's going to come a day where you're not physically better than everybody you're playing. And when that day comes, you're going to have to learn how to get guys out. You're going to have to learn how to move the ball around and change speeds and do all that. I still don't think anybody does that, right? I think that if you were to suggest to somebody what I said earlier about myself, which was, I know what I can do max effort, but I know I can't pitch there. If you suggest to somebody today in an organization, hey, don't pitch at max effort, take it down a notch, they'll run you out of the building, get out of here. So I think to me, that's the big problem, right? Is everybody to your point, and it blows my mind when I hear guys say it, everybody that gets on the mound now throws every pitch with the intent of a swing and a miss. That's crazy, but it's what they've been taught. It's what they've learned. It's what they view as being successful, right? Like a hitter who he doesn't care if he strikes out 200 times as long as he hits 30 bombs. Well, in your day and early in my day, that guy would have been released. That guy'd be done, right? I mean, so everything about it, what is considered successful nowadays has changed across the board. But I think, again, I watch so many guys take the mound now, and it's like every single pitch they throw is a max effort pitch. Like they have to throw the fastball as hard as they can. They have to throw their slider or their curveball as hard as they can to make it do what they want to do. And I think, to my earlier point too, that's one of the things I learned how to do as a pitcher when I started throwing more, because if you get on the mound, if you're going to throw twice in between starts, you can't throw at 70 or 80% effort level and throw 40 or 50 pitches a bullpen session and do that twice in between starts and stay healthy. I had to learn how to throw 2 bullpens, do it at 60% effort level, 25 to 30 pitches, but make the ball spin the way I wanted to make it spin at a low effort level. And the byproduct of that, again, was, okay, now when I go in a game and I dial up my adrenaline and I'm pitching at a 95% effort level, it's a hell of a lot easier to make that ball spin now. And it's a lot easier to make it do what I want to do at that effort level. But if you never learn how to do it without throwing it as hard as you can, then you're never going to learn, right? It was like we always used to call it was our feel and touch. We're going to go in the bullpen and we're going to throw with a little bit of feel and we're going to put some touch on the ball. We're going to make it spin and do the things that we want to make it do in a game. So now when we get in a game, it's easier. Guys don't do that, So suggesting the pitch to contact, guys will look at you and be like, what is that? What do you mean? You mean you're actually trying to get them to hit the ball? Yeah, get a ground ball.
Yeah, I think there's a stat now where if you have a high contact rate, no matter what the result is, that's a negative stat. There is an actual stat.
No, listen, I had some games later in my career where, I pitched some pretty good games. And I remember that some of the feedback at the end of a game, say I went 7 and gave up 2 and punched out 4, with a walk or 2. And the feedback at the end of the game was, yeah, you only had 3 swings and misses. I'm like, I don't care. I had 12 ground ball outs. Right? So, but that's the mentality in today's game, right? Like that, to your point, that's a negative,
Yeah,
I mean,
they're trying, it's like they're trying to win a series of statistical events rather than the game. Who's got the highest spin rate? Who's got the highest velocity? Who's got the most swings and misses?
Yep. And I think until you change until you change the mentality for the pitchers as to what going out there and pitching means and what a good game actually is, like 4 innings of 1-run ball is not a good start. I'm sorry. It's not. But that's, that's the whole reason. And, we could talk an hour another time about, what are we going to do to evaluate starting pitchers now that nobody wins games anymore? Well, why aren't they winning games anymore? Figure out a way to stay out there.
You got to pitch 5 innings.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting you bring all that up, and I'm not saying this just because the guy's dad is in the room. I coach a Maccabi team, so I go, it's 14 kids and it's a 1 week tournament, and basically, I go to all these high school games. And there's this kid, Syosset, Newsday, he was rated one of the top 5 pitchers on Long Island, but he's not one of those flamethrowers. He's a kid that pitches to contact. No, like he's not a lefty, but he reminds me of a Tom Glavine type pitcher. Moves the ball in and out. He is a pitcher. He's not a thrower. And what you mentioned is huge because these kids that are bigger and stronger, through 10th and 11th grade, by 12th grade, they're all the same size. And the other kids are big and they know how to hit fastballs. So I'm hoping that there might be a shift, but I agree. No colleges, it's velocity. That's all they care about. So I don't want to keep you all night long. I want to, Steve Trachsel actually went on camera. Either he's on camera or that's like a very cool video. I'm going to give Steve the final say here.
I had to make a little adjustment because I have, my daughter's naked in the pool back here.
Yeah.
Isn't that what pitching's all about, Steve? Making the adjustment?
Yeah. Turn around, California. It's not too bad.
Oh,
So.
man.
It's not bad. Yeah.
Not
bad.
too shabby, Trax.
Yeah. But like what Tommy was saying about bullpens and stuff, that was when he came over, that was one of the things that was so fun to watch was him to take a sinker and basically it was 4 pitches in one. He had the sinker to come off the plate, he had the sinker to the front door, and then he learned to cut it. He basically turned one pitch into 4 or 5 pitches. And it was something that I had never seen. I've been in the big leagues 13 years at that point, and I had never really seen that done. And then he started doing it with his changeup, and we're just like, man, he's got 5 or 6 different pitches with one pitch, and then 3 or 4 different pitches with his changeup. And then if he wanted to, he'd flip his curveball in there, and the hitters are like, okay, no, we don't even know what to look for. So we really enjoyed watching Tom throw and learned a lot throwing his simple bullpens. And like you said, there were 60% effort. So when he did go into the game and maxed it out a little bit, it was just a pleasure to watch all the time. You just learned so much, even though he was lefty,
Yeah. Thanks, Trax. I appreciate that.
All right, Tommy, as always, really appreciate your time.
Got to say hi to the campers.
Yeah.
And listen, what a night. You got Eddie Lynch, you got Steve Trachsel joining in the Zoom room. Normally we stay on afterwards and we talk Met baseball, what went on in the week, but you know what? This was a masterclass in pitching, and there's nothing we can talk about afterwards that's going to top this. So we're going to end it tonight with this. And Tommy, as always, you've been very gracious with your time, your whole career with me, and I can't thank you enough. And I just love hearing you talk pitching. It just is an amazing thing. And even though a lot of those 300 wins came at the cost of the Mets, in retrospect, we were extremely lucky to see the 3 of you guys pitch. What a pitching staff, and like Eddie said, we'll never see the likes of that again anywhere.
Well, probably not. I hope we do, but who knows? But no, I enjoyed being on with you guys. I love talking baseball, and I don't get enough of it nowadays, but I enjoyed it. So we'll do it again.
Awesome. I will hold you to it. You know that, Tommy.
All right. I know you will.
All